There's something we often overlook when it comes to receiving gifts, something invisible but powerful. We focus on the material object, how pretty it is, how expensive it looks, how thoughtful the gesture might seem. But what we don't always realize is that every gift carries energy. Yes, energy, and not just sentimental or emotional weight. I'm talking about symbolic, spiritual, and sometimes even karmic energy, the kind that can quietly enter your life through the most innocent-looking package. That's why it's important to understand not every gift is a blessing. Some are invitations, and not all invitations come with good intentions. See, the moment you accept something from someone, especially when it's freely given, you're entering into a spiritual exchange. Whether you believe in the unseen or not, this exchange doesn't ask for your permission. It simply happens. That gift becomes more than a physical item. It becomes a carrier. And what it carries depends on the motive behind it, the symbolism it holds, and sometimes even the condition of the person giving it. Think about that for a second. There are cultures all around the world, ancient traditions that stretch back thousands of years, that have understood this truth far better than we do today. They recognize that certain objects can influence luck, energy, and even the harmony in a person's life. Not because of superstition, but because of spiritual principle. The kind of principle that doesn't change just because society has gotten more modern or skeptical. Now, I'm not saying you need to become paranoid and start refusing every birthday or holiday gift from your loved ones. That's not the message here, but you do need to become discerning. Because sometimes the most harmless-looking gifts are the ones that open the biggest doors to confusion, loss, or emotional heaviness. That bracelet a friend gave you out of nowhere? That ornate mask someone insisted you take home from their travels? Those things might seem like tokens of affection, but if they carry negative symbolism or energy, they can slowly begin to affect the atmosphere around you. And let me tell you something else. Intention matters, but it isn't everything. Someone might give you a gift with love, but if the object itself carries a long-standing cultural or spiritual symbolism tied to misfortune, it doesn't matter how sweet the gesture is, the symbolism still holds. Like how some objects are believed to welcome in poverty, sorrow, or even death, not because the giver meant any harm, but because the object's meaning doesn't change just because someone wrapped it with a bow. This is why it's not enough to ask, do I like this gift? You have to go deeper. You have to ask, what does this gift represent? What kind of energy might it be bringing into my life? Who is this person in my life spiritually? And what might be attached to them? Because you might be accepting more than just a decorative item. You could be inviting in the energy they carry too. And energy isn't always obvious. You don't see it with the naked eye, but you feel it. You sense it. You live it. Have you ever brought something new into your home, and within days, you start feeling uneasy? Things get tense. Maybe arguments happen more often, or your sleep starts to feel disturbed, and you don't even connect the dots because the gift seemed harmless. But in the unseen realm, it marked the opening of something. We have to be awake, spiritually awake. There are people who, knowingly or unknowingly, pass on the weight they carry through the gifts they give. Sometimes it's jealousy. Sometimes it's bitterness. Sometimes it's plain misalignment. But when you accept something that's symbolically or spiritually heavy, you're giving that energy permission to settle in your space, your mind, and your relationships. You don't have to live in fear, but you must walk in wisdom. Discernment isn't about suspicion. It's about clarity. When you're spiritually sensitive, you'll start to feel when something doesn't sit right. You won't even be able to explain it logically, but something deep inside you will say, don't take it, and that's the voice you need to listen to. Because not all gifts are meant to bless you. Some are meant to bind you. Some are meant to distract you, to confuse your peace, to delay your purpose. And it won't happen all at once. It happens slowly, subtly, so quietly that by the time you notice, you're already carrying the weight. So hear me. Learn to say no without guilt. Learn to trust your spirit over politeness. Learn to walk away from a gift that doesn't sit right in your soul. Because the cost of accepting the wrong thing is always greater than the awkwardness of refusing it. What enters your life through a gift can either unlock doors to favor or open windows to chaos. Choose wisely. There's one kind of gift I want to talk to you about that might seem harmless, elegant, even, but it's one you should never, under any circumstance, accept. I'm talking about sharp objects, knives, scissors, anything that cuts. You might be thinking, what's the big deal? It's just a kitchen knife set. Or they were just trying to be helpful. It's a sewing kit. But listen closely. When you accept a sharp object as a gift, you're not just accepting a tool. You may be accepting division into your life. See, sharp objects carry more than just physical danger. Spiritually, they're symbols. Symbols of severing, breaking apart, cutting ties. In many traditions, Asian cultures, African beliefs, even old European folklore, giving someone a blade of any kind has always been a red flag. Why? Because it represents cutting the bond between the giver and the receiver. It represents a break, not a blessing. And the moment you take it in your hands, you've unknowingly agreed to that spiritual message. Now, I know some of you might be practical thinkers. You're saying, well, it's just a gift. It doesn't mean anything if I don't believe in it. But here's the thing. Truth doesn't require your belief to be real. A knife is still sharp, whether you believe it can cut you or not. The same goes for spiritual symbols. They operate based on principle, not personal opinion. So even if your intention is innocent, and even if the gift giver means well, you could still be inviting a spirit of division, conflict, or emotional detachment into your life simply by accepting what looks like a generous offering. Think about relationships. Have you ever noticed that sometimes, right after receiving a certain gift from someone, the relationship suddenly shifts? A closeness starts to fade, communication gets tense, or you begin to feel an unexplained distance from them? You can't quite figure out what went wrong, but it began with a moment when something sharp was exchanged, and without realizing it, you allowed that symbolic cut to be made in the connection. And it's not just about romantic relationships. It could be a friendship, a business partnership, even a family bond. I've seen people accept a beautiful antique dagger from a relative, only to experience a sudden falling out with that same person not long after. I've heard stories of couples gifting each other luxury knife sets and finding themselves in the middle of arguments that feel out of nowhere. But it wasn't out of nowhere. It came through agreement. The kind of agreement you make in the unseen world when you receive something that carries the spirit of severing. Now, some of you may be asking, what if someone gives me a knife or scissors and I can't say no? What if it's a cultural situation, or I don't want to offend them? In those moments, you need to use wisdom. One way many cultures handle this is by symbolically buying the sharp object from the giver. You give a coin in return, even a small one, something to break the symbolism. What you're saying spiritually is, this isn't a gift. I've made an exchange. There is no cut between us. And let me tell you, that small act can block a major spiritual consequence, because it's never about superstition. It's about alignment. What are you aligning your spirit with? What are you giving permission to walk through your door? Because every object has a message, and some are louder than others. A sharp object shouts, separation. And unless you want that energy creeping into your closest relationships, you do well to say thanks, but no thanks. I remember someone once telling me they received a pair of ornate scissors from a mentor they admired deeply. It was meant as a token of creativity and artistry, but not long after, that mentor suddenly cut them off. No conversation, no closure. The relationship, which once had so much potential, was gone in an instant. Do you think that was coincidence? Or could it be that the scissors weren't just a symbol of art, but also a prophecy of what was to come? Sometimes what looks like a gift is actually a message, and you need discernment to hear it before it speaks into your life. And let me just say this, if you've already accepted something sharp, don't panic, but don't ignore it either. Pray over it. Break any agreement you may have made unknowingly, and if peace doesn't return, consider letting it go. Some objects are just not meant to stay in your possession, not because you're being dramatic, but because you're choosing peace over symbolism, alignment over assumption. We don't live only in the physical. And when we understand that, we start making decisions differently, carefully, spiritually. And that's where protection lives. In the quiet choices, the little refusals, the wisdom to say, this may look good, but it's not good for me. Because what seems like a gift may be the very thing designed to cut something away from your life. Let me ask you something. Have you ever received a wallet or a purse as a gift? Maybe it was wrapped nicely, maybe it even had a designer label, and you smiled, said thank you, and tucked it away thinking it was a sweet gesture. But did you check what was inside? I'm not talking about tags or receipts. I'm asking, was it empty? You see, a wallet, a purse, these aren't just fashion items. They represent something powerful in your life, your finances, your provision, your ability to receive and hold wealth. And when someone gives you one of these items, completely empty, it's not just a casual oversight. It can be a spiritual message, one you don't want to accept. An empty wallet represents lack, emptiness, a closed flow. So when someone hands it to you without even a coin inside, what they're really, though often unknowingly, offering you is the symbolism of scarcity. And if you accept it without understanding, you may be inviting that same energy into your life. I know that sounds strange. It might even sound like a stretch to some. But in the spiritual world, symbols speak louder than words. And if you're not careful, you'll find yourself agreeing with lack without even realizing it. Now, I'm not suggesting everyone who's ever gifted you an empty wallet meant harm. Most people don't even know what they're doing when they give gifts like that. They think they're being generous, thoughtful. But intention doesn't cancel impact. That's why discernment is so important. Just like how a seemingly small act, like saying yes to something that doesn't align with your spirit, can open doors that take months or even years to close. There are cultures and traditions that have long understood this. And that's why even today in certain parts of the world, you'll find that when someone gifts you a wallet or a purse, they'll slip in a coin, a small bill, something, anything to signify flow, abundance, movement. Because they understand that money likes motion, it likes direction. And when you receive a money vessel that is already filled, even just a little, you're aligning with increase instead of lack. But when it's empty, that's not just poor etiquette. That's an invitation to stagnation. And the danger comes when you accept it without questioning. When you place it in your drawer, your closet, your daily routine, and suddenly you start to notice things in your financial life becoming stuck. Maybe you can't quite explain it, but the money just doesn't seem to stay. Opportunities feel delayed. There's a heaviness, a frustration, like something invisible is holding your finances back. That's not imagination. That's agreement. Because here's what happens when you're not spiritually alert. You accept things that look good on the surface, but carry the vibration of emptiness. And once that vibration enters your environment, it begins to speak. And money? Oh, it listens. Money responds to atmosphere. It responds to belief. It responds to how you treat it and what kind of space you've prepared for it. So when you take that empty wallet, that empty purse, and you put it on your shelf like it's no big deal, you're saying, I have room for lack. I'm okay with emptiness. And let me tell you, the spiritual realm takes that seriously. Heaven and hell are both watching what you agree to. Every object you receive becomes part of the language you're speaking into your life. This is why I'm telling you, not everything you're offered should be received. Not every gift is for your good, and sometimes the smallest things can carry the biggest weight. Now listen, if you've already received something like this, an empty wallet or purse, don't panic, but don't ignore it either. You can shift it, you can speak over it, take authority, fill it with something, a coin, a note, a declaration, turn the symbolism around. But if you sense deep in your spirit that the energy attached to that gift just doesn't feel right, don't be afraid to let it go. It's not worth the financial warfare. It's not worth the spiritual blockage. And I want you to hear me clearly. You are not obligated to keep anything in your life that makes you feel spiritually off-balanced. Not out of politeness, not out of guilt, not even because someone meant well. Your peace is too precious, your future too valuable to be disrupted by an object that quietly attracts lack. Because what enters your life in the form of a gift can shape the atmosphere of your finances, and you can't afford to accept anything that carries the scent of scarcity. Let me tell you something that most people never think twice about, yet it has powerful spiritual consequences. It's one of the most common gifts we receive, especially from those who care about us. It's elegant, functional, sometimes even expensive. I'm talking about clocks and watches. Now, before you start thinking, what could possibly be wrong with a timepiece? Hear me out. Because this isn't about how it looks on your wrist or whether it matches your outfit. This is about what it symbolizes in the spiritual realm. Time is sacred. It's one of the most valuable things we have. You can get more money, you can find new relationships, but you can't make more time. So anything that symbolizes time, anything that tracks it, counts it down, keeps a record of it, has spiritual weight. When someone gives you a clock or a watch, they're not just giving you something to help you stay punctual. They're handing you a message. And depending on how that gift is given and where it comes from, that message can carry a heaviness that begins to tick away at your peace, your purpose, and yes, even your life. There are cultures that believe giving someone a clock is like attending their funeral early. Why? Because it's symbolic of counting down their time. Not just their time on earth, but their time in a relationship, in a season, in a purpose. It's a gift that suggests an expiration. And when you receive that, especially without spiritual discernment, you may be agreeing to something you don't even realize. I've heard stories, more than I can count, of people receiving a beautiful clock or a luxury watch from someone close, only to find that, shortly afterward, things began to unravel. A relationship fell apart. A dream started to lose traction. A door that had always been open suddenly closed. And they couldn't figure out why. But it all began when that timepiece was introduced. It wasn't the object itself that had the power. It was the symbol, the agreement, the spiritual implication that came with it. Timepieces, especially when gifted, can unconsciously suggest that something is running out, that the time you have left is limited, that your connection with the person who gave it to you is nearing its end. And if that gift comes from someone whose spirit is troubled, someone carrying jealousy, resentment, or even unspoken bitterness, then what they've handed you isn't just a watch. It's a countdown. And here's the thing. Some people don't even know the power behind what they're giving. That's why it's not about fear. It's about awareness. It's about being so in tune with the spirit that you don't just see what a gift is, you sense what it carries. Now, I want to be clear. Not every watch or clock is cursed. It's not about superstition. It's about alignment. It's about recognizing when something feels off, when your spirit tugs at you and says, "This isn't for me." Sometimes that tug comes softly. Sometimes it's so subtle you almost ignore it. But that feeling, that hesitation, is worth paying attention to. Because what seems like a thoughtful gift could be the very thing ushering in anxiety, spiritual pressure, or even delay. Have you ever noticed how time feels different when certain things are in your life? You feel like you're always rushing, never catching up. You're exhausted, not from doing too much, but from feeling like you're always running out. Sometimes that sense of time slipping away isn't just your schedule, it's spiritual. It's what you've allowed into your space. And if you've accepted something that symbolizes an end, a countdown, or a limitation, you may have agreed to something you didn't intend to. I remember someone once shared how they received an old clock from a distant relative. It looked vintage, valuable, something you'd proudly display on your mantle. But not long after, they started having the same dream over and over, a ticking sound, a sense of being trapped in a moment that never moved forward. And slowly, their progress in life started to reflect that. Doors that had once opened with ease suddenly became harder to push through. Time, for them, felt like it wasn't on their side. And when they finally decided to remove that clock from their home, things began to shift. Peace returned, momentum picked up, and that unexplainable heaviness lifted. Now, I'm not telling you to throw out every timepiece you own, but I am telling you to be careful what you accept, especially when it marks time. Because time is not just about minutes and hours. It's about destiny. It's about seasons. It's about the divine rhythm God has set for your life. And you can't afford to let anything or anyone interfere with that flow. So if someone offers you a clock or a watch, and something inside you hesitates, listen. If you've already accepted one and things have felt different ever since, pray, ask for clarity, ask for release. Because you don't have to keep anything in your life that disturbs your sense of divine timing. What looks like a gift of elegance may be silently counting down the peace in your life. Choose discernment over decoration. Let's talk about something that seems small, even gentle, something we barely think twice about. A delicate square of fabric, folded neatly, sometimes embroidered, sometimes perfumed, a handkerchief. It seems innocent, right? Like a kind gesture, maybe even sentimental. But hear me now. There are certain things that carry more than meets the eye. A handkerchief, no matter how beautiful, is one of those things you should think twice before accepting. Not because it's dangerous in the physical sense, but because of what it represents spiritually. You see, a handkerchief has always been tied to moments of sorrow. It's what we reach for in pain. It's what catches our tears. It's present in moments of heartbreak, grief, farewells. It's the quiet witness to the breaking of hearts and the letting go of loved ones. And when someone gives you a handkerchief, especially as a gift, they may not realize it, but they are passing on a symbol that is deeply connected to emotional release, to endings, and to sorrow. In many spiritual traditions, it's believed that gifting someone a handkerchief is like saying, "You'll need this for the tears you're going to cry." It's almost a prophecy in cloth. A quiet way of saying loss is coming. And when you accept it, especially without understanding, you may be agreeing to walk into a season of sadness that was never meant to be yours. I've seen it too many times. People receiving handkerchiefs from loved ones, friends, even mentors, only to find themselves overwhelmed with emotion weeks later. The relationship starts to unravel. A season of grief they weren't expecting shows up. Not because the gift caused it directly, but because the gift carried agreement. It opened the door for sorrow to feel invited. And once sorrow senses invitation, it doesn't wait to be asked twice. Now, don't misunderstand me. Most people aren't trying to pass pain to you when they give you something like this. They're often doing it out of kindness, even nostalgia. But the spiritual realm doesn't operate only by intention. It responds to symbols, to meaning, to alignment. And the handkerchief is soaked in symbolism. Its entire existence is about wiping away pain, catching what the heart can no longer carry. It's not just a fabric, it's a message. Think about this. When have you ever needed a handkerchief in moments of joy? You don't reach for one when you're laughing, dancing, celebrating. You reach for it when your soul is spilling out through your eyes. So why would anyone need to give you something like that unless sorrow is already in the conversation? This is why discernment is so critical, because sometimes the most beautifully wrapped gifts carry the heaviest energy. And if you're not spiritually awake, you'll accept something that looks sweet but carries a prophecy of sadness. And then when you find yourself weighed down with unexplainable heaviness, you won't trace it back to the little handkerchief you tucked in your drawer. But I'm telling you, that small thing can be the entry point for emotional turmoil that lingers far longer than it should. I remember a woman once telling me that her grandmother gave her a box of vintage handkerchiefs for her birthday. She loved her grandmother, cherished her deeply, so of course she accepted the gift without question. But not long after, waves of sadness began to hit her. Not because anything dramatic happened, but because something inside her just felt heavy, constantly. And then she started dreaming. Always of goodbyes, always of things slipping away. It wasn't until she removed the box, prayed over her home, and intentionally broke that spiritual agreement that the heaviness finally lifted. You see, the enemy doesn't always show up loudly. Sometimes he comes wrapped in lace. Sometimes he enters through what looks polite, sentimental. And that's why we can't afford to be casual with what we receive. Just because something is a gift doesn't mean it's a blessing. Just because it comes from someone you love doesn't mean it carries peace. You have the right to protect your atmosphere. You have the authority to say, thank you, but this doesn't sit right with me. And let me tell you, when you start living from that place of spiritual discernment, things begin to shift. You'll notice more peace, more clarity, because you've stopped agreeing with symbols of sorrow. You've stopped letting emotional residue from others attach itself to your destiny. And maybe someone's already given you a handkerchief. Maybe it's sitting in a drawer somewhere, forgotten but still speaking. If you feel that tug in your spirit, if something inside you knows it doesn't belong, then don't be afraid to release it. Pray over it. Let it go. You're not rejecting the person, you're rejecting the symbolism. And there's nothing wrong with protecting your peace, because what may look like a soft gesture can carry a heavy burden. And you were never meant to carry sorrow that wasn't yours. There's something I need to talk to you about, and it might surprise you. It's one of those things we often dismiss as cute, decorative, or even sentimental. Something we give to children, collect on our travels, or display in our homes without thinking twice. I'm talking about stuffed animals, dolls, and masks. You might be thinking, oh, come on, those are just toys. Or, that's just art from a market. But what if I told you, some of the most spiritually sensitive people I've ever met have had to remove those very items from their homes to restore peace? Now listen, I'm not trying to spook you. I'm not trying to make you fear every teddy bear on a shelf or every cultural mask hung on a wall. That's not the point. But we're having a real conversation here, a spiritual one. And in the spiritual realm, not everything that looks innocent is harmless. Some gifts are open doors, and you need discernment to know the difference. Stuffed animals, dolls, and masks have long histories. In many cultures, dolls were never toys to begin with. They were tools, used in rituals, symbols of spirits, vessels in some cases. Objects through which energy, good or bad, could be transferred or housed. And masks? Masks have been worn in ceremonies, initiations, and spiritual encounters for centuries. They were created not just to hide a face, but to represent a spirit, an identity, a presence. So when someone gives you one as a gift, especially from a place you're unfamiliar with, you need to pause. You need to ask, what was this made for? What does it represent, and why does it feel just a little too heavy for